Hello again. The annual agonising over the singing of Rule Britannia has become something of a ritual, every bit as significant as the actual singing of the song itself. The left object on the grounds that this celebrates the British Empire and the slave trade, while the right promptly denounces them for a lack of proper patriotic fervour. Each year there are demands to stop singing the song, and these have increased since the Black Lives Matter business in 2020. It is said to be offensive to black people because of the slave trade. The BBC played a masterstroke this year by getting an African American to sing Rule Britannia. That ought to quash any accusations of a racist undertone to the thing. I sometimes doubt if either side fully understands what the song is really about. I've spoken of this before, but perhaps a brief recap would do no harm. Rule Britannia appeared in 1740 at a time when Britain certainly did not rule the waves. The song was not a celebration of the British Empire at all, but an exhortation that the British had better shake their ideas up a bit and start pulling themselves together to confront the threats facing them. The chorus is not Britannia rules the waves, which would suggest an existing state of affairs, but rather Britannia rule the waves. It is urging Britannia to stand up to bullies and enemies and start taking control of the waters around her own coast. Advice which some modern politicians might perhaps heed. A century before the song was written, Britain had no control at all, even of its own coastal waters. Ships from the Muslim nations of North Africa prowled the English Channel and the North Atlantic, seizing British fishing boats and taking their crews to sell as slaves in Algiers and Tunis. They even raided England itself. In August 1625, a raiding party landed at Mounts Bay in Cornwall. The villagers saw the ships at anchor and fled for safety to the local church, but this wasn't enough to save them. The slavers dragged 60 people out of the church, loaded them onto their rowing boats and took them on board the waiting ships. They all ended up in the slave markets of North Africa. That month, on the 12th of August, the Mayor of Plymouth wrote to the Privy Council in London. He pleaded for assistance from the Navy because in 10 days 27 ships had been taken, and all the men on board, over 200 of them, had been made slaves. When you hear it sung in Rule Britannia that Britons will not be slaves, it is to these events that the writer of the song refers. A few years later, in 1667, the Dutch Navy landed troops in England. Canvey Island was occupied briefly, and the Dutch sailed up the Medway and attacked Chatham Dockyard. This too was on the mind of the man who wrote Rule Britannia. He was saying, in effect, that Britain should at least rule the waves around her own country. Remember too that at this time, when Rule Britannia was being written, Britain was embroiled in the so-called War of Jenkins' Ear. The Spanish felt able to attack British ships with impunity, and Britain needed to show that it couldn't be pushed around. Rule Britannia is not a warlike proclamation that Britain rules the waves, but a rallying cry to urge the nation to take control of the seas and stop letting other countries push us around.